My family said the land my grandparents left me was cursed and worthless, so I turned it into an oil gold mine and watched them beg for mercy from me. I'm a 30-year-old man, and 2 years ago, I inherited what everyone in my family called a patch of cursed dirt. That's not an exaggeration, that's what they actually called it. It started when both of my grandparents passed away within a few months of each other. They were on my mom's side, and they'd been living in a rundown retirement home outside San Antonio. Not a bad place, just tired. My grandfather went first, a heart attack. My grandmother followed shortly after, some say from grief. I'm not sure. They left behind a small estate, nothing flashy, some cash, some jewelry, a few heirlooms, and, oddly enough, a 4-acre plot of dry, dusty land out in a rural corner of Texas. When the will was read, my mom and her sister split the liquid assets. I got the land. At the time, even I had to laugh a little. The place had no road access, no water, no power, and hadn't been touched since the late 1980s. It was basically brush and rocks. Everyone treated it like a punchline. My mom rolled her eyes when the lawyer mentioned it, said, "Guess Ryan gets the family legacy of bad luck." My aunt called it my desert retreat. I didn't say much. Honestly, I didn't care. I was bouncing between freelance jobs, barely scraping by in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, and buried in student debt. I figured maybe I could pitch a tent there someday when I got tired of everything else. But something kept nagging at me. My grandfather used to go on and on about that land every Thanksgiving, like clockwork. After 2 beers and a slice of pecan pie, he'd start talking about black gold. He'd say things like, "We had oil men knocking back in the day, and there's still something under there. I know it." We all assumed it was just one of his stories. The man loved his tall tales. After the funeral, I was helping clear out his storage unit when I came across a stack of his old notebooks. Most of it was just gardening notes, weird jokes, pages ripped from Reader's Digest. But tucked between 2 worn sketch pads was a manila folder full of faded soil reports, hand-drawn maps, and oil company brochures from the 1970s. That's when I got curious. I didn't know much about geology, but I figured for $1,500, I could get someone who did. I found a retired geologist online who did private consulting and paid him to analyze the samples and check the region's recent seismic reports. I expected him to shrug and say it was junk, but he didn't. Instead, he told me the data wasn't crazy. In fact, the area had some indicators that oil might still be under the surface, just deep and not worth the trouble for the big companies back in the day. That was enough for me. I didn't say a word to anyone, not even my girlfriend at the time. I contacted a small energy survey firm under my own name, paid them for a full scan, and waited. It took 2 months. The results came back, not a jackpot, but a confirmed reservoir. The firm estimated a moderate oil deposit, not huge, but definitely enough to extract. I got a few offers after that. Most were lowball attempts to buy the land outright, but one company offered me a lease deal, no upfront payment, but a 20% royalty on whatever they pulled. It wasn't glamorous. They weren't promising millions, but even a little was better than what I had. Drilling started 6 weeks later. The rig went up, and the pump started humming. No big explosion of oil, no Hollywood moment, just a slow, steady flow. That first check hit my account and nearly made me drop my phone, $1,742, and it kept coming, every single month, quiet, reliable. I still didn't tell anyone. Meanwhile, my mom was calling me every few weeks. Not to ask how I was doing, just to complain. Her heating bill went up, her car needed repairs, she couldn't afford her part of the rent at the retirement home. My aunt was no better. She'd moved in with my mom after selling her own place and burning through the inheritance on a cruise and a new couch set. Every time we talked, they'd bring up the useless land and laugh, like it was still funny. I'd just smile and nod. That's when the idea hit me. I remembered how angry my grandfather was when he had to move into that retirement home. He hated it. He used to say, "This place smells like regret and boiled peas." My mom promised she'd find something better once she got her inheritance. She never did. She pocketed the money and signed the cheapest long-term lease she could. So I looked up the ownership records for the retirement home. It was privately run and under financial strain. After some negotiation and a financing review, I entered escrow under an LLC. Roughly 2 months later, I finalized the purchase and had full control. That's when I sent the letters, formal eviction notices. 2 tenants were being removed due to a change in ownership and renovation plans, my mother and my aunt. The day they got the notices, they called me back. I didn't answer. I'd already changed my number. As far as I was concerned, they could figure it out the same way they treated me, like I didn't exist. They wanted to laugh at the land I got? Let's see how funny it feels when the joke owns the roof over their heads. The day the eviction notices landed, the front desk at the retirement home nearly broke from how hard my mother slammed her hand on it. She thought it was a clerical error, started yelling about how she just paid rent, demanding to know who made this decision. The receptionist told her the facility had been sold. New owner, new policies. She demanded to speak to the new landlord immediately. They told her he'd agreed to meet in the admin office later that afternoon. When she walked into that office and saw me sitting at the head of the table, her face changed in an instant. She froze in the doorway. Her eyes went from confusion to disbelief, then to rage. I didn't say a word, just waited. She stepped inside, grabbed the eviction letter from her purse and waved it like a flag. She asked if I was serious, if I was really the new owner, if I thought this was funny. I reached into my folder, pulled out a copy of the original will, and placed it on the table. The part where she and my aunt got the money, the part where I got that crap dirt, as she called it. She stood there, mouth tight, while I reminded her of every time she laughed about it, every time she joked about my dust farm, every time she mocked me for not doing more with my life while she sipped coffee paid for by an inheritance she blew through in under a year. Then came the sound of heels moving fast down the hallway. My aunt. She barged into the office, uninvited, already shouting, said she just heard, couldn't believe I was doing this, accused me of trying to break up the family. She called it a setup, claimed I was humiliating them in front of the entire staff. I let them talk. Once they ran out of steam, I laid out the facts. They laughed at the land. They didn't believe my grandfather. They didn't believe in me. They called me a fool when I said I was looking into geological surveys. I reminded them of a particular dinner where they passed my phone around the table, mocking the soil sample photos I had pulled up. My mother tried to change her tone then, said she was just venting back then, that she never meant any of it seriously, said I should have told them what I was doing. I opened my laptop and pulled up the text messages she sent me 6 months ago, the ones where she called me a clown chasing oil ghosts and warned me not to come crying to her when I ran out of money. My aunt leaned in, like she was about to deliver some wise family truth, told me that, regardless of all this, family takes care of each other, that they should be allowed to stay, at least rent-free, until they got back on their feet. She actually said, that's what Grandpa would have wanted. I told her that the land came from Grandpa too, that he left it to me for a reason. Maybe he knew what I'd do with it. Maybe he knew who would appreciate it. Because I remember when I couldn't make rent, and neither of them offered anything, just told me to figure it out. They had 30 days to vacate. After that, they could reapply like everyone else, but this time they'd have to qualify financially, and I wasn't offering any family discounts. That night, my phone blew up with calls from unknown numbers, likely friends of my mother and aunt from their bingo nights or church groups. Even after blocking them, messages still slipped through third parties. One voicemail accused me of abandoning my blood. Another asked if I was even raised right. I blocked every number. I wasn't doing this again. I'd made my decision. The next day, I got a message request on social media. It was from my ex-girlfriend from college, the same one who ghosted me after I lost my job at the IT firm and had to move back into a shared apartment. Her message said she'd heard about the oil thing and was wondering how I was doing. I didn't respond, just left it there. A few days after that, my latest royalty check landed, $14,592. The land was still producing, not skyrocketing, not a gusher, but steady, reliable, enough to make a difference. Then the knock came. One of my cousins, my aunt's son, showed up at my apartment, uninvited. He didn't even say hello, just stood in the hallway, asking how I could destroy Grandma's legacy. He told me the eviction was cruel, that it made the whole family look bad. I told him the legacy he was talking about came from the same woman who signed over that worthless land to me and gave his mom cash instead. If she thought they needed more help, she would have done something different in the will. He tried to argue, but I cut him off. I told him that if Grandpa was right about the oil, maybe he was right about the people around him too. Maybe he saw how selfish this family had become. Maybe that's why he left the land to the one person who didn't ask for anything. He didn't reply, just turned and left. I started digging into mineral rights in nearby counties the next morning. The oil patch on my land wasn't huge, but it was proof of concept, the first step. There were other plots out there, abandoned, undervalued, forgotten. I didn't plan on stopping with just this one. This was only the beginning. A week after I told them they had 30 days to vacate, a certified letter showed up at my door. It came from a law office, my aunt's. The envelope had her full name at the top, printed next to a firm I'd never heard of. Inside was a thick packet accusing me of unjust enrichment, elder abuse, and intentional emotional harm. They were threatening to sue me if I didn't reverse the eviction or offer them lifetime housing, rent-free. I didn't waste time. I contacted a business attorney that same day and booked a consult for the next morning. I brought everything: proof of purchase, mineral rights paperwork, signed lease agreements, even scanned copies of the will and property transfer. My lawyer flipped through it all, barely hiding her smirk. She told me straight up that they didn't have a case. I owned the retirement home, fair and square. I didn't violate any contracts, and nothing I did came close to elder abuse. At best, she said, they were hoping I'd cave under pressure. We went through the documents page by page. I showed her how I'd acquired the land legally through the will, how I funded the surveys, and how the lease agreement with the oil company had been in place for almost a year. Everything had timestamps, signatures, and legal filings. It was tight. She even double-checked the mineral rights transfer. Nothing was missing. The wildest part of their complaint was the section arguing I had a moral obligation to House family. That was their angle, not a legal claim, but a moral one. My lawyer blinked a few times reading it, looked up, and asked if this was a joke. She advised me not to respond directly, just forward everything to her, and she'd handle it from there. Meanwhile, the retirement home's legal team moved ahead with the eviction process. They weren't treating my mother and aunt any differently than any other non-paying residents. The paperwork was already moving before the lawsuit threat even landed. Their rooms had already been listed as available, and within 2 weeks, both had been rebooked by incoming residents. Full-price contracts, all finalized. There was no turning back now, even if I wanted to, which I didn't. Word got around fast. I didn't tell anyone, but someone did, probably one of their friends from the home. A neighbor mentioned overhearing my mother crying in the hallway. She had called my father, her ex-husband, asking for money to help her move somewhere else. He turned her down, said he was already helping her enough with her car payments, and didn't want to get involved. My aunt didn't even get that far. She packed a few bags and tried to move in with her son, my cousin, the same one who showed up at my apartment blaming me for ruining everything. But after hearing she was trying to sue me, he refused to let her stay. She had told him it was just a letter, but once he found out she hired a lawyer and filed an actual claim, he told her to leave. She had to book a cheap motel near the highway, where she ended up staying for nearly a week. It felt like something my grandfather would have called a full-circle mess. He had this saying he used to repeat whenever someone got too confident about a bad idea: you never know when dry land will drown fools. At the time, no one paid attention, but now it felt like a warning that had finally come true. The oil situation kept moving too. As the site gained attention, a few real estate agents started reaching out to me. Most of them were just sniffing around, trying to get ahead of a possible sale. But then came an actual offer. $2,100,000 for the land, outright, all cash, clean title transfer, no royalties, no strings. I didn't even have to think about it. I turned it down. I wasn't in this for one payday. I wanted the long-term flow. The royalties were increasing as extraction stabilized, and I'd barely touched the potential of the site. Plus, owning the land gave me leverage I didn't want to give up. By the 3rd week, my lawyer called to give me an update. My aunt's attorney had quietly withdrawn. There was no follow-up, no court filing, just silence. The firm had probably realized how weak their case was and didn't want to waste resources. There was no settlement, no agreement, just a closed file. I got official confirmation from the retirement home the next day. My mother and aunt had been fully removed from the property. Their rooms had been cleaned out, their belongings boxed and stored. A new couple from Dallas had already moved into my mother's old unit. A retired teacher and her husband. No drama, no complaints. That chapter was over. There was no announcement, no big family discussion, just paperwork and new names on leases. I didn't contact them again, and they didn't contact me either. Every number was still blocked. Every message filtered out. Whatever they were saying behind closed doors, it didn't matter anymore. I was already looking ahead. There were 3 more parcels of land in nearby counties flagged by the same geologist who found my original site. 2 were privately owned. 1 was unclaimed due to back taxes. I wasn't finished, not even close. The message came through my cousin's wife. My mother wanted to meet. She called it a peace talk, said it would be neutral ground. The meeting was set at my cousin's diner, a small place off a county road, about 30 minutes from where I lived. I didn't agree right away, but I had my lawyer look into it. When she found out it wasn't legally binding, just a family meeting, she suggested tagging along, just in case things got out of hand. So we went together. I walked in first. The booth near the back had more people than I expected. Not just my mother, but my aunt was there too. So were two people I didn't know, one older woman and a man in a suit who had a leather binder and business cards already laid out on the table. My cousin brought water to the table and left without saying a word. The man introduced himself as a financial advisor. My aunt leaned in and said he was just here to help mediate and talk about long-term family planning. The moment he opened the binder, I knew what this really was. He started talking about family unity, about legacies, about shared resources. He said my grandparents probably didn't intend for things to become so uneven. He brought up the idea of forming a family trust, said it would be the fair thing to do, that by combining income streams and redistributing profits, we could repair relationships and build something lasting. Before I even said anything, my lawyer closed her folder and told him flat out there was no legal precedent for what he was suggesting, that all the assets had been properly inherited, that there was no ongoing litigation, and that I had zero legal obligation to share any part of my income or ownership. She also asked him why someone who wasn't a licensed estate planner or attorney thought he could advise on trust formation without a single binding document in front of him. My mother started tearing up halfway through the back and forth. She said her father would have hated that money had split the family like this, that he raised them to stick together, that the land was supposed to mean something more than cash. I reminded her, in front of everyone, that she laughed in my face the day I inherited it, that she tried to sue me, that my aunt followed up with two separate threats, that they mocked me for taking that land seriously, and now that it had value, suddenly they were talking about togetherness. No one said anything after that, not even the advisor. I told them I wasn't sharing anything. I wasn't interested in trusts or group planning. I told them to stop finding new ways to ask for money. Then I stood up, told the lawyer to send me whatever bill she wanted, and walked out. Later that week, the retirement home manager called me. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but she wanted to confirm something odd. Apparently, 2 applications had come in for part-time staff positions, kitchen prep, and office support. The names, my mother and aunt. They were trying to get hired at the facility they'd just been evicted from. As the owner, I had final say on hiring decisions for non-contracted roles. I filed an internal note, marking both as ineligible for hire due to tenant conflicts and past legal threats. Their applications were denied. The manager posted the open roles again the next morning. 2 days later, my aunt left a voicemail on my cousin's phone, which he forwarded to a mutual friend. She was yelling about how her power had been shut off, claiming I was using oil money to get revenge. She thought I had pulled strings with the utility company to cut her electricity. I hadn't touched a thing. She hadn't paid the bills on her old property in months, and the cutoff was automatic. Her name was still on the account. Then another letter came, this time from a new attorney representing my aunt again. This one claimed I owed her compensation for forced relocation and lost financial opportunity. They claimed I had abused a position of power to hurt vulnerable family members, and that if I didn't agree to mediation, they'd proceed with legal filings. My lawyer didn't wait. She drafted a response that included a cease and desist for harassment and threatened a defamation suit if they continued to target me with baseless legal accusations. She sent it by courier and email just to make sure it landed. That same week, I finally visited the drilling site in person. I'd seen photos, read reports, gotten monthly updates, but I hadn't stood on that ground since the day I first found my grandfather's notebooks. The crew greeted me, gave me a tour, and showed me the updated output numbers. The well's yield had ticked up slightly, enough to bump the next check over $16,000. The site was clean, organized, and expanding. New equipment had arrived that morning. While I was there, the site supervisor pulled me aside. He mentioned something strange. A few weeks earlier, 2 women had shown up, asking about the well, claiming to be part owners, and demanding financial details. They were turned away, but he figured I'd want to know. I told him to lock the site down. I had my lawyer send a formal cease and desist and had signs posted at every entrance. Private property. No trespassing. All visits by appointment only. Before I left, the company's lead engineer handed me a folder with a new proposal. They wanted to expand drilling into an adjacent zone of my land. Their scans showed signs of another reservoir. The estimate said it could double production. I took the documents home, read them twice, and flagged the sections for review. It wasn't a one-time stroke of luck. This was building into something bigger. And my family? They weren't done trying to tear pieces off it. A few weeks after the last meeting at the diner, I finally got around to clearing out one of the old storage units my grandfather left behind. It was mostly junk, old gardening tools, rusted license plates, boxes of National Geographic magazines. But in the back corner, wedged between 2 broken chairs, I found a small metal toolbox with a lock. The key was taped underneath. Inside was a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in bold black ink, with one line underneath it for Ryan if you ever open this. I sat in my truck and read it right there in the lot. Inside was a handwritten letter, a folded map with hand-drawn markings, and several pages torn from one of his old journals. The letter wasn't long, but it got to the point. He told me to never trust my aunt with money, said she would ruin anything she got her hands on. He said if I ever came into control of the land, to keep it, protect it, and never sell it to the ones who already tried to steal it once. The journal entries explained it. Years ago, during a financial rough patch, my mother and aunt had tried to get my grandfather to sell the land. He refused, not once, but multiple times. He said the land mattered to him, that it was more than money. At one point, the entries mentioned that they even forged his signature on a fake offer letter to make it look like he agreed to sell. He caught it just in time. I'd never heard any of that before. No one ever said a word about it. I decided to find out if it was true. I met my mother at the same diner where they ambushed me. This time I didn't bring my attorney. I just laid the letter on the table and let her read it. She stared at it for a long time before pushing it back across the table, said it wasn't real, that my grandfather had become confused toward the end, that he was mixing things up. I didn't say anything, just picked up the envelope, paid my bill, and left. My aunt didn't even bother denying it. I found her at the same motel she'd been staying in and handed her a copy of the journal. She glanced at it once and told me my grandfather was paranoid and senile at the end, said I was being manipulated by ghosts and dirt. I went to the courthouse the next day, asked for access to archived property filings under my grandfather's name. After a short wait, they gave me a few boxes of old documents to go through in the records room. That's when I found it. 2 separate filings submitted 10 years ago with his name on them, attempting to transfer the land to an unknown buyer. Both were flagged and denied due to signature inconsistencies. It lined up with the dates in his journal. I asked about pressing charges. The clerk told me the statute of limitations had passed. It was too old. There was nothing I could do legally. A few days later, I got a call from the man who had been the executor of my grandfather's estate. He'd seen my name in the local paper again, tied to the drilling expansion, said he figured he should reach out. He told me he always suspected my mother and aunt had ulterior motives. He said the only reason my land hadn't been contested in the will was because they didn't think it was worth fighting for. They took the money and heirlooms, left me the dirt they thought was cursed. Back at the retirement home, things were unraveling again. The manager called and asked to meet privately. During a recent review of assisted housing applications, they flagged one from my mother. She had submitted paperwork for a government-assisted senior living program and listed her income as 0. She left out her inheritance and the months she'd lived rent-free in the facility I now owned. The manager asked if I wanted to report it. I told her no, for now, just keep the file. If anything else came up, we'd decide then. That same week, I hired a private security firm to monitor the drilling site after hearing from the crew that people had been poking around the property, asking questions. I didn't want to take any more chances. Cameras went up at every gate. The access road was sealed with a keypad lock. The crew received strict instructions: no guests, no unannounced visitors. The oil company moved fast. Phase 1 of the expansion started with new rigs being brought in, and a second drill site prepped on the eastern edge of the land. By the end of the month, my royalty statement came in, $18,780. The crew told me the second site was showing even better pressure than the first. I took that as a sign. I bought the adjacent parcel to the north. It had been sitting vacant for years, and the owner was ready to unload it. I paid cash and closed in under 2 weeks. I didn't care if it had oil or not. I just didn't want anyone else getting near my land. Because after everything that had come out, the forged documents, the hidden past, the manipulation, I had no doubt more was coming. My family hadn't hit bottom yet, but I was ready. My cousin, the only one in the family who hadn't picked a side, invited me to a barbecue at his place, said it was a small get-together, just a chance to clear the air. I asked if anyone else was coming. He told me it would just be him, his wife, and a few others. No drama. I agreed, but not without checking in with my attorney first. She told me to keep my distance, but I still showed up. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew it wasn't what he said it was. My aunt was already there, dressed like she was headed to a press conference. My mother was standing under the patio umbrella with a binder in her hand. A man in a blazer stood off to the side with a messenger bag, and next to the grill was a woman with a press badge and a camera hanging from her neck. They'd set the whole thing up. My aunt had brought a notary. The man in the blazer was there to witness some kind of family settlement. The journalist had been told this was a story about a grandson unfairly hoarding oil profits after his elderly grandfather was manipulated. They'd even printed up documents. One of them had my name on it. They wanted me to sign over partial royalties into a family-managed trust. I didn't sit down. I didn't raise my voice. I pulled out my phone, took photos of everyone standing there, including the documents on the table, then turned and walked out. I didn't say anything until I got back to my car. Then I sent my cousin a message. "We're done. Don't call me again." 3 days later, the reporter called me. She apologized, said she'd been misled about the story, said my aunt claimed I had cut the entire family out of an oil fortune. After manipulating my grandfather in his final years, once the reporter looked into the public records and saw the legal filings were clean, she backed out. No article was ever written. That only made things worse. My aunt sent an email with a PDF attached, titled Draft Lawsuit. It was full of dramatic language, claims about asset exploitation, financial isolation of seniors, and emotional fraud. None of it had legal standing, but it was clearly meant to scare me. My lawyer didn't hesitate. She drafted and sent a final warning. Any further contact, direct or through third parties, would result in immediate litigation for harassment and defamation. She also sent copies of the letter to the retirement home and the oil company for documentation. It didn't stop them. A week later, my aunt attempted to contact the oil company directly. She claimed to be a silent partner in the drilling rights and demanded accounting access. The company's legal department flagged the email and sent it to me. They also forwarded it to their internal counsel. Within 48 hours, they issued a formal trespass warning and copied my lawyer. That was the final line. My lawyer filed a no-contact order through a local court and sent certified letters to both my mother and aunt. The oil company added them to their restricted list. The retirement home, after reviewing the situation, formally banned them from entering the property as guests, staff, or residents. The manager confirmed it in writing. They were permanently blocked from ever setting foot on the premises. During all of this, I had started therapy. My sessions were quiet, straightforward. One session in particular stood out. After laying everything out, my therapist told me I was dealing with a form of survivor's guilt, that because I'd gotten out financially, emotionally, I was struggling with a subconscious sense of obligation to people who had never helped me in the first place. I didn't argue. I just started journaling every day, not for anyone else, not to share, just to track the madness and keep things straight. The money kept growing. The oil company completed the second drill expansion and offered a new proposal, this time from a national firm interested in acquiring drilling rights for the vacant land I'd just purchased. The offer was structured as a royalty split with performance incentives. My lawyer and accountant reviewed it, and we began negotiations. I wasn't selling, just leasing rights, keeping everything under my control. Then came the last straw. A friend of mine, someone I hadn't spoken to since the barbecue, reached out and said they had something I needed to hear. They'd recorded audio during that event, not on purpose, just by habit. They'd been taking notes for a freelance piece about local businesses and had left the recorder on. On the audio, clear as day, was my aunt's voice saying, "He'll cave. He always wanted us to like him. He's not built to do this alone." That same day, I instructed my lawyer to move the land titles into a newly formed holding company. It would own the land, lease the rights, and act as the face for all future deals. My name would no longer appear on any public documents related to the drilling site. Every move from now on would be through layers of legal protection. I thought that was the end of it, until I got a certified letter in the mail. The return address wasn't familiar. It came from a private law firm. Inside was a single document, sealed in plastic, marked with the words, "Confidential." Estate of Charles Edgar Whitlow, my grandfather's full name. It wasn't part of the original estate, and it wasn't something I was ever supposed to see. The envelope from the law firm wasn't thick, but it was heavy in a different way. Inside was a single sealed document, protected in a clear plastic sleeve and labeled, "Addendum, Estate of Charles Edgar Whitlow." Attached was a handwritten note from the law firm's founder, stating the document had been held under confidential instruction and was to be delivered only if legal pressure was ever applied against my ownership of the land. It was a second will, more accurately, an addendum with explicit terms, handwritten by my grandfather, dated 3 months before he passed. It had been notarized, witnessed, and kept in escrow by his attorney, with instructions to release it only if my ownership was challenged. The contents were clear. If oil was ever discovered on the land, I was to retain full and permanent control of all income. No portion of the royalty, property, or lease rights was to be shared with my mother or my aunt under any circumstances. The language was firm. He had predicted they would try to stake a claim and wanted it on paper that they were to be excluded, explicitly and permanently. Attached to the will was a brief explanation. My grandfather had instructed his personal attorney to keep the document out of public probate, fearing the original executor might be pressured into sharing the wealth if oil was ever found. He told his lawyer to release it only if my inheritance was challenged. That condition had now been met. I gave it all to my attorney. She reviewed the signatures, notary stamps, and timelines. The will was ironclad, and more than that, it legally revoked the original will on file, making this version the final one. From the moment my mother and aunt threatened legal action, this version overruled everything they thought they were entitled to. It confirmed everything my grandfather must have known. He didn't trust his daughters. He saw how they treated people when money was involved. He didn't want them getting their hands on the land, even if I struck oil 20 years down the line. I wasn't surprised, but it hit different, seeing it in black ink, sealed with intention. My attorney moved fast. All property deeds, the oil lease agreements, and the new will were submitted into a digital asset protection registry. The documentation was secured in 3 locations, both physical and encrypted. From now on, there would be no more questions about who owned what and who had the right to benefit. Following her advice, I placed all current and future oil royalties into an irrevocable trust. It listed me as the sole beneficiary and administrator. The trust held all the mineral rights, all future leasing profits, and the land titles. No family member, no matter what they claimed, could ever touch it. Just as the paperwork was being finalized, my lawyer received notice that my mother had tried to contact me through a former neighbor, someone we both knew from childhood. She had attempted to pass along a message, asking for a real talk without lawyers involved. That violated the legal agreement. Instead of responding, I signed off on the formal incident report and approved the update to the trust's terms. The new version made it clear any future attempt at indirect communication would result in legal proceedings. Through the retirement home's legal liaison, I had a final letter sent to both my mother and aunt. It was brief and formal. It stated all communication was permanently terminated. They had every chance to be decent, and they gambled it away. I reminded them that they once called the land worthless, and it only became valuable when I believed in it more than they ever believed in me. After that, I drove out to the land one more time, this time by myself. The second drill had gone operational. The well was pumping, clean, steady flow. The expansion deal with the oil company had been signed, and based on the updated production forecasts, my monthly royalties were now projected to exceed $35,000. It wasn't luck. It was built from years of being underestimated. I brought with me a small carved stone, nothing fancy, just a dark slab with one word etched into it, earned. I placed it at the base of the main rig, right next to a fence post my grandfather had marked with a red tag all those years ago. Then I made a choice. I purchased a large stretch of land to the west. No mineral value, no oil, no buildings. It was just raw, untouched Texas land. I donated half of it to a local conservation trust, the kind my grandfather always supported. The rest I left as is, no drilling, no fences, just peace. Before I left town, I visited the cemetery. I hadn't been there since the funeral. I placed a single note between their headstones. It said, "You were right about the land and about them. Thank you for giving me more than dirt." And then I left,